Have a look at this headline in the Financial Times. Just Stop Oil to end direct action protests. Climate activist group claims victory after demand to end new oil and gas becomes UK government policy. Yes, their statement is 3 years after bursting on the scene in a blaze of orange at the end of April. The Just Stop Oil campaign will be hanging up the high vis. Have they won, George?
Well, I mean, yes, there is this government policy. Perhaps, we hope, that there will be no new oil and gas, although it's slightly wobbly around the margins as to what new means. Is it no new exploration and opening of reserves, or no new licensing of existing reserves? But anyway, what Just Stop Oil and other groups are up against is the most repressive, anti-democratic, anti-protest laws in any OECD country, and it makes it almost impossible to sustain a protest.
And you think that's why they've given up?
Well, it's bound to be a
not
factor.
given up, declared it's closing.
I mean, it's just exhausting. You're constantly up against this
they did
massive
rather lose public
legislative
support.
Well, they came in under what
when they shut down the M25 and, you know, all of the ambulances were stopped. Or was that a different group? I'm not really sure.
No, actually,
anyway,
it was a different group. It was a different group. Let me explain this.
Sort of, you know, it gets you on the front page of the newspaper, but it rather loses public support for your cause, I think.
You see, I would look, disrupting lives, damaging historic monuments. That is not, it's just unacceptable behaviour, I have to say.
Right.
That is not the way to make your point. And as you're right, we have consulted on our manifesto pledge about new oil and gas licences, and the consultation closes in April, so we'll wait and see. But of course, we've got to invest more, and the government actually is already prioritising since July. So I don't think they have won, because, you know, we've already put in $8 billion for carbon capture. We're creating 44,000 jobs.
But you have pledged not to have any new oil and gas licences, taking your caveats on board. So they have made a point, and you followed with policy.
No, it was in our manifesto. We've had a consultation. It closes in April. We'll wait and see what comes out of the consultation.
This isn't about disruption at all. You know, there's been this propaganda onslaught. Look, they're blocking the roads. This is outrageous. Protesters have blocked roads. Protesters, let me get to this, because protesters have blocked roads for hundreds of years. It wasn't a big issue. Suddenly, it's the end of civilization as we know it, because there's been this massive onslaught in the billionaire press, amongst the right-wing junk tanks, to demonise protesters. But the people who have done the most road blocking, the people who cause the most disruption, they're not Just Stop Oil or Insulate Britain, they're farmers. And for the past quarter of a century, we've seen massive farmer actions. In December, there were farmer actions blocking the roads with tractors in central London. Multiple ambulances were delayed. Was there a word about this from the Conservative Party, from the Labour Party, from the newspaper you write for? No, nothing at all. We can just live with that. That's fine. In the year 2000, the farmers blockaded the oil refineries and the fuel depots. They shut down the motorways. They brought the whole country to a halt. Your party leader at the time called them fine, upstanding citizens. Not one of them was arrested. 2 months ago, they drove the Prime Minister away from a speech he was giving, forcing him to flee. This is not about disruption. This is about the people doing the disruption, who both these parties are deliberately trying to shut down because they cannot tolerate challenges to wealth and power.
Harriet? Honestly can't understand what I'm listening to, really, because I think we're all in favour of protest in a democratic society.
No, you're not.
I think where Just Stop Oil lost public opinion was by doing things that were really disruptive.
More disruptive than the farmers?
No, because with the farmers, they worked with the local Metropolitan Police to make sure that they were incredibly orderly in terms of their protest. But of course they wanted to make their point. And so
stacked up trying to get through.
Are you somehow saying that farmers shouldn't protest this?
No, absolutely, they have a right to protest.
No, he wants them all to protest.
So
we do support the right for people to protest in this country. And of course, you're talking about farmers. When you want to do a protest in London, you have to speak to all the various the police and the council, etc. etc., to make sure that you've got road blockages and it's safe and secure in that regard. But the issue for me, I've got to say, is the historic monuments that have been damaged. I don't accept that. I'm sorry, because what kind of message is that giving?
Well, I mean, the group, they threw paint and powder, everything from paintings. We saw some of the pictures there at Van Gogh's flowers.
None of it.
Sunflower, Stonehenge, paint being thrown at Stonehenge, climbing up motorway gantries, yes, bringing them to a standstill too. You do admit there was disruption, and these things were...
No, there was disruption, but all protest, if it's to be effective, has got a disruptive element.
Do you think they lost support, though, as a result of those disruptions?
Absolutely, because there was this massive propaganda onslaught, and that does lead to the end of support, to closing down support.
Including...
I've been around long enough to see this, you know.
Mercy?
Well, I think that when it comes to Just Stop Oil, Extinction Rebellion, I mean, to be honest, I can't tell the difference half the time. A lot of what these people come out with is so extreme, it's catastrophising. And actually, I think the British public have a lot of sympathy for sensible arguments that are rational, that are reasoned when it comes to climate change, when it comes to the things we need to do to combat that. Telling, young children the world's going to end in, 10 years or whatever it is, and causing all this catastrophising around it, that's what's lost people. So people stopped listening to the message.
Just Stop Oil were actually calling for?
Well, they were calling to stop oil.
To stop new oil and gas, which has now become...
Which has been
so
done,
why
but
is that an extreme and outrageous...
That was a policy that existed.
So why is it an extreme and outrageous position, which you've just claimed?
It is the case. You will not see somebody with, a day job, a normal sort of working class person on these streets, going and destroying, public property, going and causing mayhem. You won't see that in this is a middle class kind of eco-zealotry that is...
You don't think any of these protesters are working class or have day jobs? Is that what you're saying?
I think they're spoiled middle class kids often who are eco-zealots, and they often are not making...
You've conducted a survey.
Have you conducted a survey?
I've met probably far more protesters than you ever have.
What is the mix, do you think? I mean, sort of broadly the demographic?
It's a very mixed bag. I mean, my experience over many years is that all walks of life. I was up trees with ex-soldiers, with curly moustached colonels, with unemployed people who previously worked at the local supermarket. It's a very, very broad movement, and has been for a very long time.
I think
this is part of the demonisation effort.
The environmentalist movement is absolutely a broad movement, and so it should be, and I completely support that. But I think this was a movement of a completely different nature.
But how do you get noticed? How do you get noticed otherwise, unless you take these sorts of actions?
Well, I suppose you don't. But if you're going to do, with the farmers, for example, what the farmers were calling for, I think we should all support our agricultural industry. I think we all rely on our agricultural industry.
I think the Climate Coalition, for example, when we saw young people really get behind that, it was more educative. It was explaining to people actually why we've got to take the actions that we have, given the impact on climate change in this country. But I think when you get to the point that Just Stop Oil of historic monuments, you lose the British public. If you can't take them with you, right, you're not going to be successful. There are lots of ways of making your protest and making yourself known, writing to MPs, coming here in Westminster.
So you think that a protest is valid only if it has majority support? Goodbye to the civil rights movement.
Absolutely not.
Goodbye to the suffragettes. Goodbye to the Charters.
It's got to be done in the confines of a democracy, within the legislation.
Every group which has ever secured our rights and freedoms was highly unpopular at the time. They have been valorised
George, what message does it give to young people to
lately,
say it's okay
we've called them heroes. But at the time, they were everything they did was considered outrageous and unacceptable, just as these protests are today. But today's villains, demonised and cast out, will be seen as tomorrow's heroes.
I mean, does the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Act, has it had a chilling effect on protests? It might be part of the reason that Just Stop Oil have hung up their high-vis jackets, as they say.
It doesn't seem to have done. I think we have a lot of protests in this country, and a lot of protests in Westminster, particularly on a Wednesday. So, yeah, there seems to be no shortage of people willing to protest.
George talks about suffragettes. We've got better laws in this country, right? You can make your point. You can get your issue noticed in lots of different ways. You don't need to tell young people that they can go into a museum and just destroy our art and our artefacts.
Is that going to work?
Our history? Of course it does. I mean, you know, lots of people lobby.
Talking the power of MPs, let's have a little look inside the chamber, because I think it's almost time for Prime Minister's questions. And, of course, it is the last session before the Easter recess.